He tries to get out of there, and it gets physical. And at that point, the defendant takes that knife, and it's clear at this point that he stabs him several times. He stabbed, the doctors are going to tell you, 3 times at multiple depths inside of his person. 2.5 inches, 3.5 inches, 4.5 inches. One of those straight to the heart.
We've got the convenience store homicide case. Defendant Taiseer Zarka is the accused. Now, it's expected to resume in about 30 minutes from now. Welcome to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. So this guy is charged with second-degree murder for the stabbing death of a customer in his convenience store. The man who's deceased is Mark Garrity Jr. The incident happened in last year in April. Zarka claims that he stabbed Garrity in self-defense after they got into an argument over an alleged stolen bottle of Gatorade. Let's take a look back at the best moments from Thursday.
When I got there, I saw droplets of what appeared to be blood on various things such as the plastic bags, the front counter, the floor appeared to have streaks, red streak marks, and it appeared that it had been mopped.
Did mopping up the floor in any way, shape, or form detract from the collection of evidence in the store?
No.
And on his shirt, did you notice anything on his shirt?
It appears that there's areas of similar appearance to blood. He had a Band-Aid on his right thumb and his left index finger.
I've always had a professional relationship with him. He had attempted to shake my hand, to which I declined, not trying to be rude, but there was blood about his person. He stated at one point when I first arrived on scene that he was trying to be a tough guy, I think probably implying the deceased, who was no longer on scene at the time.
Referring to that individual, he said he was trying to be a tough guy?
That's correct, sir.
One thing that you wrote down in your report that Taz said that Mr. Garrity, the other person in the incident, was trying to be a tough guy.
Yes, sir. Any statement like that, I want to be presented to an investigator to properly document it.
Any bruising, swelling, bleeding, cuts, scrapes on his head and face?
On his head and face, no. As we saw, he did have a couple marks on his hand, but on his head and face, I don't recall seeing anything.
When you watched the video, were there other people in the store when the stabbing happened?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to identify those other people?
Yes, sir.
During the course of the investigation, did you learn about Anaya Rogers and a possible cell phone video?
Yes, sir. She recalled seeing the victim going to an ice cream cooler, and at some point, Mr. Taz approaching the victim, as she described, with a knife out, quote unquote. She initially thought that he was pulling the knife on her.
Did she describe what happened, if anything, when the defendant got to the victim with the knife?
She described Mr. Taz jamming him up, quote unquote, against a table.
Okay. Did she make any statements about the defendant and how well he gets along with a lot of people?
Objection.
When you spoke to her, did she make any statements regarding the defendant and his interactions with other people?
She did make a statement that he fights a lot of people.
Did she make any statements about him ever cutting bags before?
She did. She said that he has cut one of her bags before on a previous occasion.
Did she say why she believed that he had cut her bag?
She indicated that Mr. Zarka believed that she stole some chips and cut her bag as she was walking out of the store.
All right, what do you think of this case? Really, the only question is whether this homicide was justified, right? So when you have a case like this, we know that one person killed another person, right? So this is a homicide, but not every homicide is illegal. Some of them are justified. Some of them are accidental. Some of them are murder, and they are illegal. And that is the contention of the state of North Carolina. If you're wondering, this trial is happening in the Raleigh area, capital of North Carolina. Let's bring in our legal analyst guest and talk some more about what we've seen so far. Criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Joe Tamburino on the show today. Joe, okay, give us your assessment, please. How do you view this case? And I know it's still early on, but your thoughts so far on the facts.
I think this is a great example of how a defendant's post-incident conduct affects a case. Because what happened after the stabbing in this case was not good for the defendant. The defendant showed coldness, disregard for human life. When after he stabbed this young man, he simply started mopping, didn't go out to see if the kid was okay, never called 911. It shows that he had a very cold state of mind. Had he done things differently after he stabbed this kid, I don't know if he would have been charged, because he does have a pretty good defense, especially under North Carolina law, which gives him the absolute right to try to detain this man using reasonable force, of course. And then what he's going to argue is that at some point, even though, you know, he did have a knife, this young man kicked him in some type of karate kick, and that's why he started stabbing. So he's got a defense, but his post-stabbing conduct isn't good. It just shows him as being someone who's cold and in a disregard for human life.
Joe, thank you for that analysis. Tell me, do you think that Taiseer Zarka could help himself in a case like this if he testifies?
Yes, I think he's going to have to testify, because he's going to have to explain why he acted the way he did after the stabbing. And of course, he has to explain how he felt his life was so threatened in this situation, and that's why he had the knife. He also needs to explain why did he bring the knife into the situation in the first place? Because as we know from watching the videos, he has the knife on him pretty much the whole time, from what I can see. You can't see his hands 100% of the time, but every time you could see, I think it was in his right hand, you could see that he has a knife. So even though he's under no obligation, no legal obligation to take the stand, and even though the presumption of innocence stays with him, he really, in reality, has to explain what the heck was going on.